Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 25th National Our Community, Our Health, a town hall series that facilitates a two-way conversation between researchers and community members across the country. Before we get started, I ask that you please silence your cell phones. Our topic tonight is distracted driving, and our panel of doctors will be discussing the research and how distracted driving impacts traffic safety. My name is Danielle Eshelman, and I'm the Coordinator of Communications here at Health Street.
And I'm Jordan Live, and I'm the Communications Assistant.
Health Street is a community engagement program at the University of Florida with a mission to reduce disparities in healthcare and health research. If you're interested in connecting with one of our studies, or if you'd like more information, please feel free to contact one of our staff members. I'll introduce our members for tonight's panel. As moderator, we have Carrie Gallup, Alachua County Deputy Sheriff, and joining us online is Dr. Shan Bao, Associate Professor in the in the Industrial and Manufacturing Systems Engineering Department at the University of Michigan. And joining us in person is Dr. Wayne Jiang, Assistant Professor in the Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering at UF and Human Factors Research with a focus on human decision making and interface design. We also have Dr. Pruthvi Manjunatha, I-Street Test Bed Manager and a Research Assistant Professor in the Department of Civil and Coastal Engineering. Dr. Sandra Winter, Research Assistant Scientist in the Department of Occupational Therapy and the Associate Director of the University of Florida's Institute for Mobility, Activity, and Participation. And Dr. Jennifer S. Bard, a Visiting Professor of Law at the University of Florida's Levin College of Law, who has advanced degrees in Law, Public Health, and Higher Education.
Perfect. So before we begin our event tonight, I'll explain how you can have your voice heard at our town hall. If you're tuning in through the live stream, you can tweet your questions using the hashtag OCOH. You can send your questions through our live stream app. You can access our live stream app through the link bit.ly/OCOH February 11th, or by visiting our website, myhealthstreet.org, and clicking on the orange button labeled Our Community, Our Health. Once the app is open, click the speech bubble icon in the bottom right corner, which will open up a form where you can type your question. Just click Ask Question after you're done typing to send it to us. If you're with us in the audience, you can submit your questions this way through your smartphone, or you can write it down. You can also raise your hand, and we will come over with extra paper and pen for you if you need. You can also visit our Facebook page at UF Health Street to check into our event tonight.
And now we'll hand it over to our moderator, Carrie Gallup.
So the topic of distracted driving that we're looking at tonight is something that's kind of very important. It's becoming, in my opinion and experience and the things that I've seen, a much higher concern since we are becoming more and more anchored to our smart devices, cell phones, iPads, things like that. I have 31 years in law enforcement, but the last 10 years have been spent in crime prevention and talking about public safety and education. So I know from what I've seen just in the highlights, we have a pretty great group of panelists here with a lot of good information. I'm interested in seeing kind of where the information is going to take us, as well as the questions are going to dig into what are we looking at as where it is today and where are we headed? What is this problem going to present itself even greater risk in the future? We have a first presenter.
Is that me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be here tonight, not in the town hall, but in the Michigan. So my background, just a little bit about myself. My background is a human factors engineer. I have been in this field for about 15 years. So I have done a lot of research related to distracted driving, because we all know distracted driving is actually not a good thing in our daily life. But now with the technology, especially like smartphones, iPad, so there are more and more distracted driving that happening daily in our lives. So if we so in my research, so this is basically my research interest. Like I I'm also interested in a lot of human factors issues related to automated vehicle technology, such as how we can design training and education programs to help people with the advanced technology. So with that, so here's the focus of my distracted driving. As the first step, I have done study to look at what exactly the impact of distracted driving on driving performance, driving behavior, and driving safety. So then as a second step, so we looked further. We know distracted driving is bad. That's also consistent, the evidence from a lot of other researchers, their evidence in their studies. So then the second step, I have done quite a lot of research, basically developing behavior metrics to quantify these behavior degradation. So for example, one of the study I did is basically transferring the time domain variable into the frequency domain variable, so we can have a more sensitive measurement to detect and predict distracted driving. So the third step I have done in my research related to distracted driving is basically to develop algorithms and models to predict that drivers distracted driving, not just from the host vehicle perspective thing. Also, we are using in-vehicle sensors to detect the surrounding vehicle's driver state. For example, we are using the mobile eye sensor that installed in our participant's vehicle. Then we use the data collected from the mobile eye sensor, then develop algorithm to detect whether the leading vehicle driver is engaging in any distracted driving. So then we can issue warnings to warn our drivers to stay further away from the other distracted driver. So among all my distracted driving, so I have the summary here. It's also along with other researchers. So the tool we have used is there are 4 tools that we can use to study distracted driving. For example, naturalistic driving study. So basically, we are giving cars to people for people to use for their daily lives. So then we can actually capture and record their naturalistic driving behavior. Well, we can understand when they are going to engage in distracted driving, how, and what exactly the performance and the safety impact. The other tool is a simulator study. So by doing simulator study, we can actually have a more controlled study settings. So then you can test a lot of, for example, you can have the passenger impacting on the team drivers. Then you can ask the drivers to look at their iPad while driving, so you can measure their degraded performance during distracted driving. The third and the fourth tool is basically we can look at on-road study as well as the crash data analysis to see what exactly the distracted driving, the components in the crash data. So then all the tools, study settings can give us all kinds of data, for example, behavior data, vehicle kinematic data, video data, that we can think about algorithm, how to integrate all those data together to develop models. So here's one of the examples from my one of my studies that we use the naturalistic study data to look at what is the odds ratio that drivers engage in texting, phone conversation, when compared to they are not distracted, how their crash rates or heartbreaking rates when compared to they are not distracted. We found a huge difference of the distracted driving impacts. Also, we also look at different age groups impact as well. So this is related to the second part of my study to look at behavior metrics development to see, because some of the variables in the time domain, such as the standard deviation calculation, relies on the time window you are selecting. So then in this part of the study, we actually developed some frequency domain variables basically to minimize the time window reliance and to develop a more reliable distraction measurement. This is just give you a very quick view of our other study, basically to use the mobile eye sensor data. Then we developed the algorithms to detect leading vehicle drivers' distracted states. So we have this study already published in the conference Fast Zero as well as the AAP journal. With that, I'm going to stop here, and I'm happy to take questions later. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Okay. So we want her to go ahead and continue, or? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'm next. Hi, Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. So, like Dr. Bao, I'm also a human factors engineer. Let me see if I.
I have one more slide.
Yeah. So I'm not as accomplished as Dr. Bao is in her work, but I also do study how users interact with new technologies and develop new strategies for interacting with new technologies, specifically in safety critical systems. So places like healthcare and surface transportation are prime areas because we have a variety of different users with different backgrounds, different expertise, and they have to learn how to use new technologies while they're doing things like driving, which are very critical tasks that have large consequences. Besides that, I'm a technology person. I love gadgets. And I know I develop poor habits around gadget use in my daily life. And once you take those habits and you translate them into activities where the consequences are higher, those are places we want to study and either learn why users are adopting these strategies or figure out ways that we can build systems or training to mitigate those. So in this case, I've been really looking at new devices that have been used. So things like smartwatches and smart glasses are becoming more popular, but we still don't fully understand what the consequences of their use are in driving contexts. We know smartphones are bad. Lots of studies like the ones that were presented by Dr. Bao have showed that. But when we have new technologies, sometimes they're marketed as being ways of reducing distraction. So smartwatches definitely have been marketed as that. And I've run studies in the past about how, whether smartwatches actually resulted in distracted driving behavior in simulator studies, which is one of the methods that Shan mentioned in her talk. So we compared whether people, when they were sent notifications, and they had to either read them or respond to them, what those actually resulted in terms of behavior. And we found that even though most individuals didn't think that smartwatches were more dangerous than smartphones, we saw detrimental behaviors in terms of how long they spent interacting with the notifications. Their break response times were slightly slower with the smartwatches than with smartphones. So we did see detrimental effects, even though they felt that they weren't as dangerous. So this miscalibration of risk can be consequential in terms of whether people engage with these activities in their daily lives. One of the new areas that I've been looking in are actually about pedestrians. Oh, actually I have videos here. So this is a video showing some of the results from one of my distracted driving studies. So you can see that with smartwatches at the bottom and the smartphone on top, there's very different methods that you interact with the devices. When you're interacting with a smartwatch, you're typically using two hands. With the smartphone, people are very practiced at doing it with one hand down low. So those can result in differences. And also the smartwatch as an interface is much smaller, so it often takes more time and more glances to go through a task. The next sort of area that I've been working on is distracted pedestrians, because as we move towards more autonomous vehicles, we're getting to a point where distractions are going to be one of the things that are more allowable in vehicle space. Even though it's still dangerous, still requires study, but the surrounding pedestrians becomes much more critical. So, we conducted a study looking at how many distracted pedestrians there are on campus, and we found that it's very common. Right, about 32% of the pedestrians we saw, and this is on campus, so this might be a higher distraction group, but they were distracted in either a smartphone, headphones, or some combination of both of those. And we also looked at 3 different locations. So we studied distraction rates at an intersection on campus, in a walking plaza, and then an indoor food court. And you would think that the intersection would have lower rates of distraction, but that wasn't true. Most of the people they actually had similar rates as the walking plaza. In fact, we found the lowest distraction rates within the food court, and that's because there's this high density of people. So people are more modulating based on how many people are around them rather than possible dangers caused by interacting with the device. And I think that's everything I have. Let me check. Yes. So I'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. I come from a slightly different background. I come from engineering and traffic operations background. So I look at traffic flow as a whole as opposed to drivers as individuals, but we still need to understand drivers as individuals because they make up the traffic. So I work, I'm my street manager, and so I work with connected and automated vehicle technology. So as a part of that, we also need to understand how humans interact with this technology. So we have a human factors group. Nice to work with Dr. Winter and Wayne as a part of the human factors group there. That's my background. Today I'm going to talk about the work I did during my PhD a few years ago. So what we did was we wanted to understand, so just like how liquids flow through pipes, traffic flow through roads, right? So there's a steady flow and there's turbulent flow, and depending on kind of flow the traffic is in, we have traffic breakdowns at different situations. So it's important not only for mobility to keep the cars moving, it's also important from safety because you have more accident in a turbulent flow situation. So how do we study that? So we usually use what is known as micro simulators, where we have where we model traffic. So, but unless we build in behavior into that those models, we can't study those behaviors. So we use a couple of constructs from psychology called workload and situational awareness to capture that behavior. Workload in generic term is basically, it kind of represents how stressed the drivers are in a given task. In this situation, the task is driving. So, and situational awareness represents how aware the drivers are of their surroundings, how focused they are, right? So if you're distracted, probably your situational awareness will be low, right? So those are the two concepts we use, and we designed a driving simulator experiment. We had 40 drivers of different ages and different backgrounds driving through different scenarios. And we wanted to see, can we classify these drivers based on their workload and situational awareness? So we did, in fact, find that we can clearly classify it into 2 different types of drivers. One group of drivers are more stressed, less focused. Let's call them group A, with low situational awareness and high workload. And the second group is less stressed and more focused. So we were able to separate drivers into these 2 groups. And we try to see, is there something specific? Are there older drivers, younger drivers differences? Is there a gender difference? We saw that although there were some differences, they were not that significant. So what was more significant was when we asked them the questions about their regular driving patterns, we were able to see that there's a big role of distraction. So we asked them questions like, do they check their speedometers often, or do they keep driving without realizing? Do they check their rear view mirrors before passing another vehicle, or do they tend to have like this sudden braking kind of situations where they realize that the vehicle in front of them is slow too late? So we did indeed see a significant difference between the 2 groups. So the people who tend to have this distracted kind of behavior, they have these bad habits built into their driving, and they tend to exhibit such behavior even when they are driving in a driving simulator without any distractions. So how does this individual behavior have an impact on how they drive? So how you feel has an effect on how you drive. If you're more stressed, you would intuitively think that you would drive differently than a person who is not stressed or relaxed, right? So that's what we were able to find in our measurement. So what we did was we recorded what is the distances they're maintaining with the vehicles in front of them. So are they like moving within their lanes too much? Are they making too many lane changes? And when exactly they're making their lane changes? Are they braking too much? Are they accelerating too much? So what we saw was the drivers who were more stressed and who were less aware of their surroundings, they seem to have maintain like longer headways because they are not confident that they can maintain shorter headways to the vehicles in front of them, and they tend to accelerate and decelerate a lot, and they tend to make more lane changes as the traffic density increases. We made the drivers drive through different traffic densities, low traffic, higher traffic. So as the traffic reaches the breakdown situation, these drivers tend to make too many changes in their driving. So what happens is at the traffic level overall, like the more focused drivers you have, more steady and more smoother the traffic will flow, and you can completely use the capacity of the roads, and most likely the accidents will be less. The research has shown that higher density turbulent flow leads to more accidents. So both mobility and safety, it's better to have more focused drivers on the roads. So the next question is, how do we make people more focused? I guess that's where Dr. Jiang's team is working on, where like we try to see what kind of interface design, if they have a gadget or a screen in their cars, what kind of interface design helps them stay more focused, and what kind of design distracts them. And a couple of professors in his group are also working on signages. The signs we have on the side of the road, what kind of signages helps keep people more focused, keep drivers more focused. So those are it's a two benefit situation, both mobility and safety. So distraction does play a huge role, not only at an individual level, but also at a group level and at a traffic level. So that's my research.
So, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here tonight. So, Sandra Winter, I'm with the Department of Occupational Therapy and the Institute for Mobility, Activity, and Participation, and we have just completed a 2-year project for Florida Department of Transportation Safety Office. They asked us to create a computer-based training for use by novice drivers, new drivers, to address the topic of distracted driving. Partially because they were getting more, they do have a team at FDOT that's connected with the schools to go out, but they were getting more requests than they had people available to go out. So they wanted some additional support materials, but not surprisingly, 6 out of 10 teen crashes involve driver distraction. So I will not go to the YouTube link, but I will mention that study is very interesting. I use it every year when I lecture to the occupational therapy students. It is rare to have a naturalistic driving study that uses crash or near crash as an outcome. From a driving research standpoint, what they say, crash is a low incidence thing. It's very hard to study traffic safety and study crashes because they so rarely happen. But AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety got permission from parents and teens and videoed the driving of 1,000 teens for a year. And that's a 3-minute compilation video of what they found. So, which was a surprisingly high number of crashes and near crashes. No, and I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna pass on that. So what did teens need to drive safely? So it's actually a combination of things. So they need the technical skills to operate the vehicle, which a lot of them have grown up playing Mario Kart and Grand Theft Auto and Crazy Taxi maybe at the pizza arcade place. So they tend to feel sometimes overconfident in their skills. Need a knowledge of traffic rules and operating procedures, which many of them get through a formalized educational program in the school system. The third point is huge. So sufficient practice and familiarity with the consequences of bad judgment that fosters good judgment. And that means every now and then you need to have I probably could have done that differently. Hopefully it's some minor incident with the car or a near miss, but just something to help them learn that risk judgment that you don't have as a novice driver. Maturity. And this plays very much into the use of devices when you are behind the wheel. this capacity for reasoning, for judgment, decision making, and thinking not just about yourself and your needs, but also what is your role in the larger driving environment. And I think we've seen that that's true for the drivers, but the pedestrians also, as far as device use is concerned. And then safe surroundings in which to learn how to drive. So the outcome of our course was it is a teen focus on distracted driving. It is hosted by College of Engineering T2 Center, which is technology transfer. So it was developed between College of Engineering and College of Public Health and Health Professions. And basically, it's about 40 to 60 minutes of content. It's a really strong course with lots of exploratory content. So, we made interactive activities and videos for them to watch. So we talk about the basics of distracted driving dangers, help them really understand the risk. Present some statistics of teen distracted driving and what are some of the costs that are associated with that on both a personal, a community, and a societal level. We talk with them about brain development and how there's been a lot lately. I think UF has even been a part of this research on there's no such thing as multitasking. There's only there's people with very fast task switching ability, and then other people who don't switch tasks. But you really can't use your phone and drive the car at the same time. Teaching them about, this is an FDOT sponsored course, so teaching them about Florida laws related to distracted driving and different types of offenses that can occur. And then providing them with resources and also providing family resources. So one of the things our team did, a very evidence-based approach, was to find out what is effective in addressing teen distracted driving and reducing teen crashes before we designed the course, and then really trying to incorporate as much as possible those evidence-based resources into the course. So one of those things being a parent-teen contract related to driving, and also parents' understanding of the role their cell phone use has on children learning how to drive. So basically, if you are a parent and you drive using your cell phone as your children are growing up, when they reach the age of being able to drive, if you have modeled that behavior, that is what they will do. You can tell them not to use their phone and drive, but if they have seen you do it, the likelihood is that they will even begin as novice drivers using that behavior. And I look forward to talking with you later.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Jennifer Bard. I'm here from the law school, and I really appreciate you all including the law school in this. So this is the law school, so you should come visit. So my field is how do you use the law as a tool to promote public health? Like, how could the law help make people healthier? And so what I wanted to talk to you about briefly is, well, what power does the law have to make people healthier? One is a division that is not always that clear is what can states do that's different from what the federal government can do. It's kind of a user guide. So this is a circle that we use a lot in public health, and it's sort of the process of, you go from research, you go from identifying a problem to doing research, to making a program, and where we come in is around 4, policy enactment, which is how do you translate the kind of research findings that scientists like this do into laws? How do you take best practices and information and make them into laws? And then the next step is something that we in law do not do at all, and this is something I'm working on, is in the true public health model, you then evaluate how it works. We don't have that feature in a law. Once you make a law, it's there till someone takes the trouble of removing it. And they're very hard to change. So one of the things that I'm working on is there are some ways that the law, it may not be the best tool for public health because it's very inflexible. So there's two kinds of laws. A good kind of law for public health are the appropriations laws, where Congress gives money for research to support scientists. So that's certainly a kind of law. Or to provide grant money directly, not just for research, but to run a program, like one of the programs here. So that is law, when the Congress passes a law and says, well, we're going to have more money for driver safety. The other kind of law are laws that actually set terms, like, you know, the legal driving age, or how much training you have to drive, or even the speed limit laws, or hands-free driving. And those are more prescriptive laws, which are, you know, in theory and hopefully based on research findings. Thought you might want to know something about the Constitution, which is the way our government is set up. Is the Constitution got put in place to keep the federal government off of the states' backs. So it's really almost entirely a protective document to let states do what they want to do. And certainly in health and safety, states almost have exclusive authority to set the kind of laws that set safety standards. The federal government has no power to set safety standards unless they can prove that something has to be done, or it would be chaos if the whole country did it differently. So in this context, car safety standards, you really couldn't have car safety standards that are different from one state to another. But other than that, the traffic safety laws, hands-free driving, distracted driving, where can you text or can't you text, tremendous variation. And that's how the system is set up, is for states to see what works for them. So, you know, you might have a state like Montana or Texas, where I used to work, where the driving conditions are going to be very different from a small state, you know, like a Rhode Island, which doesn't have a lot of open highway. And that is the system, is that the states will have this authority. And that's just one of many maps, just to give you an idea of there is tremendous variety, and that's the point, is that you can try different things and see what works. These is just different colors to say, you know, some states say that you have to have hands-free, some states don't, some states control texting, and then I'm sure, you know, this group knows this, states are experimenting with ages. So it's like, are there age groups that should or shouldn't be texting? And then, you know, if you think about the circle, that all comes back to the research, is, well, what does research say about age groups and safety? Federal action, just to give you an example, there is the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration that does a lot of research. The federal government has the money. If you think about it, they collect income taxes and they have the money to do research, and they will do a lot of spending money on influence. They can spend money on public safety campaigns. So the federal government is there sort of sharing information, providing advice, and providing safety information, but they really do not have the power in any one state to say, this is what you have to do. You have to adopt you know, a texting law that you know, nobody from 16 and 18 can text. The federal government can't tell a state to do that. So that's really you know, what I wanted to share. And then the last thing I would say is, like everything else, politics plays a role, and there's an interesting story to be told of how Congress tried to keep the Federal Traffic Safety Administration from sharing data about distracted driving. So somewhat like the smoking was harmful data was slow in getting out. It's interesting that the science of distracted driving also was in something of a chokehold. And that's, you know, that's a factor to keep in mind. Happy to answer more questions about it.
So we do have some questions already, and this was kind of open to the panelists. Has anyone studied how people, for instance, in Mumbai drive safely in such cramped conditions?
I guess it's an India-based question, so I'll go for it. So yeah, I mean, yeah, there are comparative studies. Like, I mean, every country does their own study, and there are comparative studies. So when I was doing literature review for this project, like, I did see For example, difference between how Dutch drivers do certain maneuvers compared to Chinese drivers. I guess China is one of those countries where the car ownership is a relatively new idea, so they have a completely different culture when it comes to following the laws and driving on the freeways. Yes, there have been studies, and for that matter, the driving is not the same within the U.S. in different states. So how people drive in Gainesville is completely different from how people drive in Miami, for instance.
I would say also, and it looked like from some of your study, I noticed where the different, so going from cafeteria to external, it's a similar study because you're still looking at cramped situations inside of a facility versus going out into the open area. The next question is for you also. Maintaining lane discipline is cultural. How can you do this study on a global scale?
Yeah, I mean, there are sometimes one size fits all, sometimes it doesn't. So you have to develop different tools to study different behavior. For example, like when I was in India, I studied how mixed traffic condition works. In here, mixed traffic condition refers to having both trucks and cars on the road. Back in countries in Asia, there are scooters, there are electric bicycles, and so many different things. And there is a lane-based culture versus a non-lane-based culture where lines on the road are more suggestive than. Yeah.
Interesting. Wayne, the next question is for you. It says, are there prospects for solving the issue of distracted pedestrians as well as interventions along that line?
It's tricky because, again, there are cultural issues about it. We did this study on campus, and I think most students feel very safe on campus, and for good reason, because campus is pretty safe, so they might adopt riskier habits than they would adopt in other places. I grew up in a large city where I'm very careful when I cross the street because I don't want to get hit. So, it can be tricky because of those cultural differences. I think information campaigns are one way that has been very popular for distracted walking. There has been a lot of very public, campaigns that have been telling people about the dangers of distracted walking. But those only go so far because you need to tell people about the consequences. Part of learning is completing that feedback loop and getting people to learn about that risk assessment process. And that can, I think we probably need new training mechanisms to provide that feedback.
I would kind of agree. As the training background that I've had, just kind of looking to the panelists as well as yourself to respond back, is when you look at training people or campaigns to deliver a message to people, where are most of us getting our messages these days? You would think that, 15 years ago it was the television. Nowadays it's on your phone. Yeah. And it's been said that if your video message is longer than a minute and a half or even 30 seconds, you've lost your audience already. Yeah. So interesting. A campaign would definitely at least start. The other side of it is we all learn differently. We have the audio, the visual, and the kinesthetic. How do you teach someone kinesthetically other than simulators what's happening? What happens when someone gets pulled over for texting, and how often does it happen? I can't tell you the exact statistics of how often it's happened. I can tell you from a 31-year law enforcement perspective, as myself and my counterpart in the room have said many times, driving a marked patrol car is a preventative method, because when you pull up near someone, they instantly see the billboard driving around near them. From that, in any traffic stop, when we see an offense, we're actually going to first conduct the traffic stop in a safe location, well lit, well visible, easily area for us to maneuver out of a vehicle so that we don't get hit by other traffic and you don't put yourself at risk when we're talking to you. Once we've identified ourselves and we have a safe stop, we then are going to address the infraction. And when it comes to, in the state of Florida, texting and driving, now we have a primary reason to be able to stop someone when we see them actually functionally texting on their phone. So from a marked car perspective, it would be much more difficult to be able to catch those, I would say, unless you caught somebody totally off guard. I drive an unmarked minivan, so I have a bigger opportunity to probably catch people when I'm pulling up and people didn't know I was a cop. But the biggest thing is stopping someone safely, obviously getting their attention, stopping them safely, addressing them. From there, it's officer discretion, and at least in our agency, it's officer discretion to decide whether or not to issue a citation based on the incident that's happened. And I'm going to ask, do you have anything to add to that?
Since the law started, it's been hard because our traffic unit, we work primarily day shift hours, so it's hard to see them
texting. We're going to do a couple DUI details coming up, and at night it's going to be a lot easier because most of us drive SUVs, and like Carrie was saying, in the daytime people can see you coming from a mile away, and they'll put the phone down. But when I'm driving my personal vehicle, you see people all the time texting. They got their one leg up, driving with the other knee, going 80 miles an hour on I-75. But when they see like Carrie was saying, the billboard, is kind of hard. One thing that I'm kind of pushing for our traffic unit is just to get a couple more unmarked vehicles. It'd be a lot more easier to enforce laws when people don't know there's an officer around. But hopefully when we do some of these evening details, we'll get a little more luck, because you can actually kind of see the glow from the phone.
And to relate back to a campaign question, that's part of the campaign. Is once we have a new law, it isn't our job in law enforcement to immediately go out and create a bunch of infractions and catch people doing something wrong, as much as it is to say, you should know, if you don't know by now, this is against the law and there are dangers to it, and it's our opportunity then to educate the public where we can.
I just want to interrupt for a minute and just say thank you to all the people who are listening. This is a national town hall meeting, and so there are a lot of people from around the country who are streaming in and listening, and we want to thank them and hope they can hear us, and it looks really great online, so thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you. The next question is, will my insurance rates go up if I get a distracted driving ticket? I'm going to go based on, again, it's older experience for me, and maybe Deputy Fricker or Sergeant Fricker could elaborate. It's a non-moving violation right now. Non-moving violations don't always rate for traffic infraction insurance rate hikes. That's usually when there are points assessed. So say speeding, for example, has points assessed when you're caught speeding, and then your insurance company is notified because you were stopped and given a citation for a traffic infraction that was a moving violation. At this point in time, I would say that would be no. However, there are some insurance companies that when they find out you've had citations, your premium rates can go up just from that, no matter what it is. If it's and Wayne, the next question: do the gadgets make older drivers safe?
Do gadgets make older drivers safe? I guess it depends on the gadget. I'm not quite sure what gadgets they're thinking of. If it's a distraction, distractions are bad, and they are possibly even worse for older drivers because of compromises in visual acuity or cognitive processing. So in general, I would say distractions are not great for driving, and we should avoid them. Anything to add, anyone?
Yeah, I think I can tie into Pruthvi's research about workload. So actually, another thing we did besides the teen distracted driving, we did a review of autonomous vehicle technologies, so IVAS, in-vehicle information systems, and ADAS, advanced driver assistance systems, to look at their benefits for older adult drivers. And it really boils down to cognitive workload. If it has something that has a very simple, intuitive interface, it can provide support to the driver, but if it's too complex, too many bells and whistles, or if it's somebody's non-preferred means of getting information, then it will be a distraction, and it reduces that situational awareness, which means their awareness is on the car and on car functions and features, and not to the driving environment.
Good point. Shan, did you want to add?
So, yeah, I want to add something to the older drivers. So interestingly, if you look at the crash data, right, it's actually U-shape. So both teen drivers and older drivers, they have the highest crash rates actually in the car accidents. So actually the distraction is actually impacting on older drivers' behavior even more. Why? Because we know that teen drivers, so in one of my simulator-based studies, that I actually tested different age drivers that asked them to perform texting while driving. So we found that actually teen drivers did much better when compared to adult drivers, especially older drivers. Why? because we know older drivers actually have this behavior called self-compensation. If you look at all the distracted driving from the natural risk driving data, actually older drivers has the lowest cell phone use or distraction-related driving portion among all the driver groups, because they understand that they have relatively degraded cognitive state and physiological state. So they tend not to drive highway that much compared to other drivers, and they tend not to drive during the nighttime, and they tend not to be distracted during driving compared to all other age groups. And because of that, and also teen drivers, they are used to do multitasking while driving. They use their phones the most often, frequently among all the age groups compared to all the others. So they tend to have a better lane keeping capability than adult drivers, especially older drivers. So I would say, yeah, distraction is going to degrade it, is going to damage older driver safety the most.
Great. The next question is also for you, Shan. It says, how do the algorithms help make us safer? And I'm not quite sure where we're talking about algorithms.
Very good question. So basically, I think this person is asking about my third step of the distraction study, that we develop algorithms to predict, based on the current driver state, whether we can predict in the next few seconds whether the driver is going to engage in the distracted driving. So our hypothesis is that if the driver is preparing to engage the distracted driving, so his or her vehicle trajectory is going to show some pattern. For example, larger variance in terms of lateral vehicle control. So the algorithm can help us that pre-warn the drivers and also the surrounding vehicle drivers to say, hey, this car driver is actually engaging the distracted driving, just stay away from the driver. So that actually can help the other drivers, and also can warn the distracted driver, hey, stop being distracted. So we know that with these rapid development automated vehicle technologies, right? So driver state monitoring is a very critical component in the AV technology development. So we want to monitor the driver state, whether driver's eyes are still monitoring the road, especially for level 1 and level 2 automated vehicle technologies. So that's very important.
Thank you. The next question, are there any studies or findings as to the increased flexibility in lawmaking and change?
There really, it's interesting, very little concern about the lack of flexibility. I think the research I'm actually doing is more on opioid laws, about how the laws that were passed in an early stage of what we thought the problem was are making things more difficult now that we know how it's developing. So I think that may be the example that gets people to look at, how can you build in some flexibility in laws and just automatic reviews of how they're working. Part of it is there's no practice of starting from a thought of what would you like the law to do. So there is no mechanism for saying, well, we hope this will reduce distracted driving by 20%, and let's see if it does. So if you don't know that in advance, it's hard to evaluate.
Makes sense. When I look at when I first recognized the problem and how big it was going to be 13 years ago, we're going back to flip phones when people were doing the ABC text. Some of you weren't old enough to maybe remember that. I was a law enforcement officer in another county, and we had a tractor trailer who plowed into the back of a stopped school bus, which resulted in the death of a student that I had been a school resource officer at her school. For me, that was a very awakening moment that this is a problem, because now, I care for all life, but when it involves the life of the future for us, children, now we've got a problem that needs addressing. And of course, we're talking 13 years ago that it's taken to finally get to where just recently we get to actually stop somebody as a primary offense. So 13 years to get to where I felt we should have been 13 years ago.
But also just to point out, it's a political process. So part of what took so long was the cell phone manufacturers were not happy to have this information about distracted driving out because they wanted to sell cell phones.
Right.
Luckily, the hands-free people also had a lobby. But that's a problem too, and it's kind of, that's what the system is, but it's not run by public health.
The next question, are there any statistics on the likelihood of people talking on the phone or texting while driving based on socioeconomic levels? I was going to say,
Sorry, I can like a reference. I don't really have the social economic perspective, but I do have the number that so several years ago we did a study looking at natural study driving data to look at the percentage of time drivers are using their cell phones while driving. So basically, while the car is moving, so the drivers, generally speaking, spend 6% of the time using their phones. But again, this data is like from 10 years ago. So with the smartphone technology, I would suspect that this number would be much higher today.
interesting question here regarding probably an engineering style question. What distractions will autonomous vehicles have?
I think autonomous vehicles, depending on the level of automation, will help facilitate new things you can do in a car safely. But right now, with the level of automated driving that we have, we still need to pay attention, right? Like the human is still responsible for the driving context. So currently, there shouldn't be new distractions introduced, but we do hear of these incidents that happen where people are engaging with more distractions because they feel like the car maybe has more capabilities than it actually does. And this is a very hot ongoing research area I think all of us are getting into currently.
Yeah, so Shan mentioned the different levels of autonomy. Level 1 is the lowest and level 5 is the highest. So level 5 is where it's completely driverless. So what we are experiencing right now is level 1, 2, and to an extent 3 right now. So this can be your lane keeping assistance or adaptive cruise control and these kind of things. So and with all these Teslas and these kind of vehicles coming with more added technology, so there is definitely a difference between what the automakers promised their customers and what the drivers think it will do. So and there should be an education and outreach to make sure that they're on the same level. Yeah.
Not to mention how much redundancy is built into all these safety factors. I'm a bit of a techie, so I'm, like Wayne had said, I love technology. And I grew up, my father was an appliance repairman, so knowing that nothing is perfect, and as we build it, it's going to require more engineering to hone the skills and to be able to make it. So definitely an ongoing study with the technology as it increases. Workload situational awareness has long been studied in aviation. How does this increase, the increased size of a dashboard display, lead to overload and distraction?
I'll take the first crack at it. So I think this relates to what Wayne said about, and Pruthvi about what the automakers are focused on is the user experience. So sometimes the dashes, the overall interior of the car, the features can be, maybe not what you would want from an occupational therapy standpoint of task-focused behavior. A lot of things that you don't need or even want in your vehicle. So yeah, more is not necessarily better in the dash. And then the research that our team had done reviewing implementation of in-vehicle information systems and advanced driver assistance systems, it was basically the same thing. The more complicated systems were actually less preferred and had a damaging effect on driver behavior.
Yeah. So the automakers are all trying to figure out what is the optimum amount of information to give to the drivers. So we also did a study. Dr. Jane from the Human Factors Group, she did a study where they're trying to give drivers warnings of bicyclists that are coming through. So they were trying different ways of communicating that information to the drivers. One way was to not tell them anything, the control group. The second way was to give them both audio and visual warnings. And the third one was to give only the audio warning. And they had eye trackers to see how much of the time the drivers are looking at the bicyclists, how much of the time they are looking on the road, how much of the time they are looking on the smartphone app or the screen. Right. So and they figured out that actually providing them only the audio warning works the best as opposed to giving both audio and visual warnings.
So we're coming down. We got 5 minutes left. I was just explained, so I want to make sure we have two last questions. May not be able to answer all of them in the quality that we need here, but the first one is talking about other distractions. So checking rearview mirrors, glances at the radio, air conditioning, environmental controls in the vehicle. Those are all considered distractions. Of course, from a law enforcement perspective, we tell everybody, we teach them. Go ahead.
Sorry, can I say something? I don't think that checking the rear view mirror is one type of distraction, to be honest with you. That's actually the driver's attentive to the driving situation.
Exactly. So when we're looking in the rearview mirror, it's different from when we're adjusting. So that's why everybody makes their adjustments prior to pulling out of a parking lot or actually, taking control of that vehicle. Laws on the books offer some behavior modification, but the zeal of their enforcement has the most impact on behavior modification. I always say that not everybody will not break a law based on the consequences. It's usually, what's in it for me, so to speak, not what am I going to get penalized for. What about smoking while driving? Also the use of marijuana and the effects of drugs is our last question.
I think the use of marijuana while driving is a whole new area of research that is expanding, especially in those states with increased legalization of both either recreational marijuana or medicinal allowed marijuana use. So it's a growing field, and probably maybe sometime in the next year or two we can have a town hall just on that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, first off, I'd like to thank our panelists for all of your information. I believe it was very informative to me. Everybody, if we could give them a nice round of applause. Thank you. And I would like to thank our audience for attending. Just remember, situational awareness just isn't to driving. It's every day, all day, wherever you are. It's situational awareness. When you're driving a 3,000-pound missile down the road, now you're taking other people's lives into account, not just your own.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight, and for everyone who tuned in. And a huge thank you to all of our panelists for all of your information. Have a great night.